That's much better. Alright, so what has happened since the last time I've seen you guys? Well, there's quite a bit. I have this problem where I'm trying to do, game dev and do a YouTube channel and also have a life and a social life, work a job. And what has happened since the last time? What do we got planned here? Let's see. I have the blocking system, the AI system, the UI system, and the boss AI system. So let's start with the blocking system. We're gonna go over there first. Blocking is pretty straightforward. Alright, so if you swing at somebody and you're in front of them, and the game detects that your weapon, or the thing you're using to attack them, is in front of their shield, then they perform a block. If the weapon, or the projectile, it could be an arrow, it could be a bolt, it could be a spell, is detected to be on the side of them, or behind them, they will take damage. So I started off with this prototype, and I was kind of playing with the idea of using, like, shields, colliders itself. So first I had an actual physical collider on the shield, I scrapped that, then I actually had a collider on the character that would appear in front of them like a wall, and I scrapped that. I mean, they both worked fine, but I just ended up using a system that just basically kind of did some math and just detected if the threat was in front of the character that you're attacking, and if it was, then it processed a block. I just like doing this because then there was no unnecessary colliders or game objects on both characters. So I went with this, and I'm very happy with it, and it's working very well. Also, fun features with block. If you block an attack and you're out of stamina, it will break your guard, and it will allow your attacker to perform a critical damage step on you called riposte. This is not what you want to happen. And if you attack a shield that is quite large and your weapon has, I'll say, inefficient weight behind it, a thing will happen where it will recoil off the shield and you will bounce back. This can be mitigated by always two-handing your weapon, but some weapons have a higher reflection rate than others. Take spears, for example. If you try to attack a great shield with a spear or a broken sword, it will end up bouncing off. Again, you can mitigate this by two-handing it, and then you will never bounce off what you're attacking. I've also implemented this into some enemies because of their rough exterior, creatures specifically. All in all, very happy with the blocking system, and I find it adds up. Moving on, now we have the AI. There's a lot to this, there's a lot. So I'm gonna go over what I think is super important, because if not, I would be here for 30 minutes talking to you about AI, and we don't want that right now. So first, I will start with the personality types. An AI has a selection of options broken down into little drop menus. And we'll start with the first one being speed. So they can be slow, or they can be fast, or they can be in the middle ground of both, so average. If they're slow, they will almost always walk at you, if not always. If they're in the middle ground, they will choose between walking and running or jogging. And if they're fast, they will relentlessly run at you or around you. So this makes for a high pressure, intense fighting situation, which I'm only going to apply to a few of the stronger AI, obviously. Not everybody in the game will be like this. And then we move on to their intelligence. So they can be careful or they can be careless. A careful AI will actually strafe around you when they're in their combat stand state and look for an opening, or even try to flank you sometimes. They'll position themselves in a circular motion around you. If they hit an object, they'll back up, so if they walk into a wall, they'll go back this way, etc. And if they're careless, they will relentlessly pursue you and walk or run at you. So think of like an undead versus a knight. The undead is probably just going to run at its target or walk at its target, whereas the knight might poise up and kind of walk in circles around the target when they're not always swinging. So you can see how you can mix and match these two options already. Obviously, if you have a fast AI who is careful, they will almost jog circles around the targets or like run back and forth, mimicking a player almost in like a PvP situation. Versus if you have a careless fast AI, they will just run straight at you. So beyond that, also, we have the combat personality types. And I'm not sure if all of you here watched my previous video, but basically to decide what kind of attack you are going to do, it all depends on the weapon you are holding in your hand that you're attacking with. So if you do a right bumper action with a straight sword, it's a light attack. Specifically a light attack using the straight sword animation set or moveset. So the AI at least the humanoid AI, work on a similar system if they are like the character in the game. Some humanoid AI will have their own custom attacks that aren't inside a moveset of a weapon. I digress. But they will actually utilize whatever weapon you've given them. So if you give them, say, a straight sword, they'll use the straight sword moveset. And this, again, separates them into 3 different classes. We have the spell sword, we have the sword and shield, and we have the archer. The spell sword will utilize whatever spell you've given it, or spells. And if it runs out of aura, or it is close to a target, it will utilize the weapon it's holding. The sword and shield will utilize the sword and the shield if you enable it to fight the player or character. And lastly, the archer will utilize a crossbow or a bow. And you can also have an option to set those as a stationary archer where they will just stand at a guard post and never move to pursue their target. So after those personality types, now we can jump into the states that they're in. An AI has a few states depending on which kind you have. Every AI typically starts off in the idle or patrol state. So the idle state just makes the AI stand around until it has a target. It will detect the target by having a target that comes into their field of view with no object obstructing their view. So you have to also walk in front of the AI, but there can't be anything that's blocking the vision between you both, and then they will pursue you. If they are in the patrol state, they will do their route and patrol around the preset areas that you've set for them until they find a target or until their patrol is completed. And then when they have a target, they switch to the pursue target state, which is pretty self-explanatory. They're just going to pursue the target until they get within attacking range. And then when they're within attack range, they will actually switch to the combat stance state. Now, the combat stance state is really cool because this is where a lot of the personality types can come in the intelligence settings. So if the AI is more intelligent, you can enable them to block, you can enable them to attempt to break the player's guard, you can even enable them to dodge and parry and riposte. So the more intelligent the AI is set up, the more dangerous they can be. So if an AI breaks your guard, for example, by hitting your shield while you're blocking, then they can do a critical attack on you. And they will also look for opportunities to parry if you enable it. And you can set up the percentage of the time they will try to parry the player, the percentage of the time they will try to dodge a player's attack, the percentage of the time they will attempt to block while in the combat stance state, etc., etc. So there's a lot of customization going on here. This is my favorite form, and I've redone AI probably like 6 times, but this is the form I'm sticking with. I'm very happy with it. So beyond the combat stance state, if they're not currently in a cooldown and they are within range of a player, they will then try to select an attack. And an attack is selected by comparing the angle of the player or the target compared to where the AI is standing, and also comparing the distance. Some attacks need a minimum distance and a maximum distance, so they have to be in between these two. And obviously some attacks will need to be performed if the player is further away or closer. So for example, like a long-ranging lunging attack will not be performed if the player is right in the AI's face, but maybe a shield punch will. And some attacks can actually have the AI performing an attack to their left, right, or behind, where they kind of spin around. And those attacks will only be performed if the player is standing behind them, or to the left, or to the right of them. It's a cool system, and I really enjoy it. And beyond the attack state, pretty self-explanatory. At the end of the state, they perform the attack that they are set up to do. If this attack can combo, and you have the AI set up to perform combos, and they roll to perform a combo, they will then perform an additional attack. The AI can trace you while performing an attack if you enable it, so they can actually follow you while they swing. This is only for a certain amount of frames that you can enable and disable using animation events. And that's really the bulk of the AI right now. Next, we have the UI system. If you cycle through your weapons and armor, and you can equip them from the screen, as well as your consumables and your rings and your offhand and main hand weapons, it will actually update all the stats, the bonuses, the information, the weights, everything will appear on this middle panel. On the end panel there to the right, you have all your player stats, all that good stuff. And we have some fun stuff too here with the weapons. We actually have the weapon requirements to wield, and then we have the weapon scaling bonuses. So if you haven't played Souls before, the scaling bonuses are given to a weapon which is just extra bonus damage you do depending on the scaling stats. So for example, if I have a giant hammer that scales amazingly with strength, and I have a very high strength level, I will receive a lot of extra damage, physical damage because of strength, added onto this weapon. So I have that. If you try to wield a weapon without meeting its requirements, you will be given a warning, and you will do terrible damage, greatly reduced, and you will recoil off almost everything that you swing at. It will also cost you more stamina to swing the weapon. There's also an inventory screen where you can pick up and drop stuff, discard stuff, all that good stuff, all the stuff you've probably seen before in a game. So, moving on, then we have the boss AI. This one is, again, very similar to the regular AI, except it operates using a set of phases. You can set as many phases as you'd like with each of the boss AI. And when the boss gets to a certain percentage or number of health, you can initiate a phase change. A phase change will be evident because it will cause the boss to play some form of animation or do some action. Maybe their physical body changes, or maybe some particle effects go off. This will be then accompanied usually by an attack change. So the previous set of attacks they used before might be completely different, or it might have just a bunch of new attacks added into it. Typically it changes the flow of the boss fight and just keeps the player on their toes because it changes the way you're supposed to engage the boss. I think it's a really cool mechanic, and honestly, out of everything that the Souls combat system did, this is one of my favorites by far. We have fog walls. If you awaken a boss and fail to kill it, when you come back there will be a fog wall present which you can pass through to try to fight it again. Killing the boss will permanently disable the fog wall associated with the boss. And lastly, for some nice little polish on all the bars in the game, HP, stamina, and aura, you will see there is a secondary bar behind it when you drain a percentage or number from the stat. So all this does is basically just shows you how much you've lost from this bar and the action that is performed. So if you get damaged, you can see it shows you how much damage you've taken. If you swing a sword, it shows you how much stamina it costs to perform the swing. And if you cast a spell, it will show you how much aura it costs to cast that spell. If you guys be needing some animations, this video is sponsored by us. We have an animation store page on the Unity Asset Store page, where we are making animations that go very well with our tutorial series. So if you are making a Souls-like game, or you're just a fun hobbyist who likes to make little projects, we have some animations out there. It is a great way to support Nephilim and to support the tutorial series. And lastly, before I go, don't forget to drop a like, leave a comment. It helps appease the YouTube algorithm gods. And a special thank you to my patrons. It is genuinely because of you guys I get to keep doing this, and I have a lot of fun doing this. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I will see you guys in the next video.